Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Al Jacobson, Executive Director of the Allentown Symphony Association, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to our second Meet the Artist event of the season, 23-24. Thank you again for joining us as you get to learn a bit more about this weekend's programs. I like to do the show of hands. If you do not have a ticket for this weekend, do not raise your hand. Okay, you all do. So you're going to hear me talk more this weekend at our event, so I don't need to share much more than that, except to say we have some exciting performances this weekend, wide variety of music and artists that are with us who come from actually all over the world. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce the music director and conductor of the Allentown Symphony Orchestra, Diane Wittry.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you. So we have our wonderful guests. I'll talk on the mic so you can hear me. I'll just introduce them by name, but we'll get to know them in just a minute. We have Peh-Treet Cheku, our guitarist. We have Clarice Assad, our composer in residence. And we have Jesus Para, our conducting fellow. Let's give him a round of applause. So this concert, you guys are really in for a treat. I was talking to the orchestra last night when we were rehearsing, and you know, it's not that often that we get to do these wonderful chamber music concerts. So you will be seeing a smaller orchestra on stage, and one of the main reasons for that is we have a guitar soloist, and I don't want to cover him up. And I don't want to spend the entire rehearsal telling the violins to play softer. They really hate me when I do that, you know? And they need to play a certain volume to get a core of sound. And so I reduced the orchestra to a size that I felt we would be able to balance nicely with Peh-Treet. And so that's one of the reasons. And then, so knowing that I was going to invite Peh-Treet. So Peh-Treet was the first place winner in 2011 of our Schadt String Competition. Let's give that a round of applause. And we've stayed in touch. I've followed his career, and you may or may not be aware, but this year is the 25th anniversary of the Schadt competition. Pretty amazing. That deserves a round of applause, too. So for those of you that don't know what the Schadt competition is, this is a competition we started 25 years ago, and it was because two brothers, Lee and Edwin Schadt, who grew up in this area, and it was very interesting because they left a large trust. So it just goes to show you what you can do if you leave the Allentown Symphony a large trust. Because they believed that we had the ability to do something really, really great, which I think we've done. One of their dreams was to have a competition, and the other dream was to support young people in the region playing string instruments. So the competition is really to bring people from all over the world to be inspirational to people in our region in the Lehigh Valley, so you hear the best of the best. Because without that role model, a young person doesn't know where the top of the mountain is. And we need to show them the top of the mountain, and we need to inspire them. And so part of this is the educational outreach that happens when the Schadt winners come back to our community, and they visit our El Sistema program, and they work in the schools. And then some of the funds from this actually support our Young Musicians String Festival that we have in the spring, which you should all come to because it's a very heartwarming event where we have students ages 4th grade to about 9th grade that play reduced melodies from the concerts that we have. So they're going to be, this will be before the Beethoven 9 concert, they're going to play reduced versions of Beethoven 9 and some of the other works on that program. And so this is also sponsored by the Schadt brothers. I was fortunate enough to meet Lee Schadt. Edwin had passed away before I came here, but Lee I met when he was, I think, 97. And it was so interesting because he told me that even though his parents had had them both play violin, they had special violins made for them by a man named Mr. Johnson, who actually lived here in Allentown. But he said he always actually wanted to play the saxophone. Anyway, so that's the Schadt brothers. But we wanted to bring back Peh-Treet for this. So the whole concert is built around the works that he and I selected together. So the Rodrigo that he's going to tell us about in a little while, and the Vivaldi. And then I felt I needed, Vivaldi was an anchor, but I felt I needed another anchor. And, you know, I love Mozart. I thought, wouldn't it be great to do his final symphony? And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I remember that Al and I, the executive director, we went back and forth on the order of this concert. You know, so we kept moving. We were trying to figure out, well, do we put the guitars on the first half, the second half? My initial one, I had you on both halves, so we felt, well, that would be a little weird. So, you know, we do think about the timing and pacing and the flow of each concert. So in order to solve that, I actually added a little opening work, which I'm going to play for you now. It's just 3 minutes long, and it's the Handel, the entrance of the Queen of Sheba. And it's from his oratorio Solomon, and it's between the third section of that. And it really showcases our phenomenal oboe players. And it's funny because Jesus was asking me, well, why do you have a bassoon playing? There's no bassoon part written. And I was telling him the story of when I was younger and I worked in the summers for the LA Phil for their summer music festival, kind of like a Tanglewood. And I was administration, I was the personnel manager, and Eschenbach was the conductor. I don't know if you know Eschenbach, some of you. So Eschenbach was the conductor, and we were doing Handel, or we were doing something of this era. And I'd hired the players according to the score, and he comes in and he just railed me up and down because I had not hired a bassoon player to double the basses and be what we call the continuo part. So ever since then, whenever I do Handel, I hire the bassoon player. So you're going to see a bassoon player, and 2 oboes, and they're actually going to stand for this. And you're going to see the harpsichord back there. We went to special trouble to get, not only to get the harpsichord, to get this color of sound, but I have Patrick, who is my favorite Baroque harpsichord player. If you came to the concert directly before the pandemic ended in March, he was the soloist for that concert, and he's phenomenal. But let's listen first to, make sure I have my seat. I didn't give you the whole thing. I only gave you that one track. Yeah, so it's happy, it's joyous. Have you heard it before, some of you? Yeah, they use it sometimes in weddings, but it's one of, just a really great opener to the concert. It sets a mood. And then finishing the concert, we have the Mozart. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mozart now before we go on to the other pieces. And I just have a little bit of each movement. But first you need to know that Mozart wrote his last 3 symphonies in a span of about 9 weeks. 3 symphonies, right? They're each about 30 minutes long. Is that impressive? Yeah, I think that's pretty impressive. And he didn't have a commission for these. And I don't think these were actually performed during his lifetime. Particularly the 41, what's subtitled the Jupiter, and he did not give it that name either. A violinist impresario who actually was producing concerts in London subtitled it the Jupiter, and it stuck, and that's what we know it as today. But the compositional writing in it is pretty phenomenal. So I'm just going to give you a little taste of each movement and tell you a little bit of a highlight. This is a little bit of the first movement, very dramatic, but also, I think, very joyous. So with that piece, one of the things I worked with the orchestra, I try to give you the inside scoop, is some people interpret this opening as very sort of downward heavy step. And I actually tried to get the orchestra to lift, bum, ba-ram, ba-ram. So everything is uplifted and that we're working for forward direction of the line. Because I want that sort of joyous rolling feeling to the music. So, some people ask, what does a conductor do? We set tempo, but we also set character and mood for the orchestra. So if everybody understands the character I'm trying to create, then we can create a uniform interpretation that we bring to you. okay? The second movement, here's a little bit of it, and it's a beautiful song. And once again, I'm trying to get a floaty, flowing feeling. And so sometimes, people say, well, are you in subdivided? So it's in three, do I do 1 and 2 and 3 and for this piece, I'm occasionally, when they need me, I'll give what we call the subdivisions, when I want clarity on the inner parts of the beats. But most of the time, I'm trying to give as little as possible so that I encourage the orchestra to listen and play like chamber music, and particularly in this third movement, so that it has, once again, more flow. So at the rehearsal, we talked about on these ba, 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 they were too heavy. They felt grounded. So we talked about lifting that sound a little bit. We changed the bowing style. On the third movement, and I have to put in a different CD because this was an afterthought, but it's a minuet and trio. And in the trio section, so the trio is the second part, he does a joke. And you guys will be probably the only ones in the audience that will get the joke, because I'm going to tell you what the joke is. So often in Mozart, you have a phrase, ba-dum, that ends something, right? Sounds like an ending. Well, in this trio section, he gives you the ending, and then he gives you the beginning of the phrase. He flips them around. And this is a joke that actually Haydn did, and so Mozart is doing a parody in this spot of another composer. Get it? Yeah, so you will know that little secret in there, and you'll never hear that piece the same again. The ending before the beginning. And then the final fugue. The final fugue is some of the most brilliant writing ever. So a fugue, if you're not familiar with this term, is similar to if you were to sing around like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and if you guys started first, then you started, and then you started. That's basically a fugue. You take a melody and you repeat it on top of each other. And the trick is the notes all have to match and sound good. So you have to make sure that your main theme gives you notes that you can have on top of each other in many different ways. And it's just miraculous how he does this fugue. And so our job as musicians is to try to figure out, when we have the overlappings happen really quickly, how do we make sure that that's coming through? And so I say to the players, they have to play the little motive and then they have to duck. They have to change their dynamic and immediately go softer so that somebody else can punch through. There's a section in the middle, we're not going to listen, but you'll hear it at the concert, bop-ba-bom, 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 where he does it, first he starts doing it 3 times, and then later on he does it 4 times as an echo of entrances. So we worked really hard on getting that to punch out so that you can hear each of those statements as they go by. But here's just a little bit of the beginning, and the beginning states the main fugue, which is these 4 rising notes. Music. And when we get to what we call the coda, it's a section at the end, so we've had this music, we've had what we call the development, where it gets all kind of on top of each other, like we're all fighting, and then we finally come to where we all play it together, and I stopped the orchestra. I said, when we arrive here, it's like you have to play it very emphatically, like you finally all agree on something, right? Here we are, bum-ba-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum. So before that, we're just everybody's playing in their own world. They're all saying, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right. And then finally we all say, okay, no, we're together on this. But then at the very ending, it will all clear out, and then you'll hear that rising da-da-da-da again. And then listen very carefully, because at that ending, he puts 5 different themes on top of each other. So think of the compositional technique required to do that. Pretty amazing. So it's going to be a great way to end the concert. So I'd now like to introduce Peh-Treet. And Peh-Treet is